Everyone, welcome to this webinar by the Eastern Suburbs Regional Group of the Order of Australia Association. And I know that our speaker tonight, Rhett Butler, is going to join the list of people who've had a number of fascinating stories to tell us. So welcome to you, Rhett. Thank you very much for joining us. I know Rhett's just returned from overseas a couple of days ago, so I'm glad that you've been able to fit this one into your schedule as well. Rhett is the founder and chairperson of the SkyJuice Foundation. It's an organisation that he formed some time ago, and I'm sure he'll tell us more about that. That takes up a large amount of his time in what he and many of us euphorically call retirement. But at the same time, he's also an adjunct associate professor at the University of Sydney and has some responsibility there for mentoring and thesis work with postgraduate students. Rhett, we look forward to hearing what you have to tell us about SkyJuice. The name itself invokes all sorts of images, but I know that it's a passion of yours, and as you work not only to provide equipment, but also to provide the support for people all over the world. I'm sure we're going to be in for a very interesting evening. So without further ado, thank you, Rhett, and we look forward to what you have to tell us.
Thank you, Jeffrey, and welcome to everyone. Thank you very much for having the opportunity to talk to you this evening. It's always a pleasure to share the vision of what I see about providing safe drinking water to the world. The first thing I usually say to people, they usually want to ask me this question at the end of the presentation: is my sister's name Scarlett? No, it's not. I'm the only one, so it's okay. Look, my story is probably not different to a lot of people. Is that something that I was very passionate about sort of took over my life, and I'm an engineer and I don't come with any special qualifications in philanthropy or charity work, but what I've done in the last 20 years is really to try and bring to the realization that the goal that everybody in the world deserves safe drinking water. And I don't think people realize that it still is a massive issue throughout the world, that people are still entrenched in poverty. So really, my journey has really been about a technology I developed using low pressure membranes. Technology was developed in Australia about 30 years ago. And what I did was adapt that technology to work very simply without the use of chemicals and using gravity to produce safe drinking water. So the membrane technology filters water with a pore size on the membrane of about 0.04 microns. So we're using membrane technology, which is very similar to nature, and trying to mimic what nature does to produce safe water. What exactly is SkyJuice and why have I formed a foundation? My central thesis is that what I do is challenging the norm about how we actually solve some of the world's problems. And I don't hold myself out to be a maverick or a whistleblower or someone who's trying to turn things upside down, but I think that we've got to change some of the thinking in the way we go about providing support and assistance and humanitarian objectives throughout the world. Very much historically, we've had a donor mentality of giving things away and gifting things to people in developing countries. And I think as soon as we think about it and we change the way we go about it and we involve those people as part of the solution rather than an approach where we look down at people, we can achieve a lot more. What I want to do just briefly is say what we're doing going forward. SkyJuice Foundation was lucky, and I was awarded the World Sustainability Prize in January, and that's a large prize of $1 million US. And I'm going to use that money to showcase what we can do throughout the world in 3 countries. So I'm just going to talk about what we're going to do. And last month we won the World Global Water Prize, which was fantastic after 20 years of slogging away. So it means that now people are starting to take a bit more notice of a new approach about how to solve the world's drinking water problem. So Without any further ado, my message is pretty clear, is that, believe it or not, everybody in the world can have safe drinking water, right? And quite often you hear people say, no, it's too expensive, you know, the technology is too expensive, they can't afford it. Technology is available today and it can be achieved for less than 50 cents per person per year. The technology is here, the solutions are here. It's really about changing the thinking about a lot of the international aid organisations and charities about how we actually want to solve this problem. And factually, you know, do we really want to solve the problem? You know, what it's got to be sustainable. And sustainable is a word that's thrown about a lot these days. But if you're going to give people a solution that costs them money, uses power and chemicals, and it's not really affordable, particularly for people that earn less than $500 per annum, it's just not going to work. So you've got to have something that really is in touch with their lifestyle and what they can afford. And the story I quite often get where I go around the world and the work we do is that, you know, water should be free. You know, we should give water out. And what I found everywhere I go is people are quite happy to pay for water, even if they're impoverished. They know that water has a value and people are happy to pay for water, but it should be equitably priced. So that the price that people pay should be in line with what their lifestyle and what they can afford. And the problem we've got at the moment is there's no real collaborative ownership of these problems. People look towards government, they look towards donors, and they look towards institutions to provide them solutions. And what, you know, my message is that the only way we're going to solve these problems is to let the people who are the recipients to actually own the solution and let them run their own resources and determine their own future. And that's quite radical because we used to usually government utilities and government authorities providing us things like electricity and water. And of course, if everyone has safe drinking water, it has a huge multiplier effect on their lifestyle. It means they can get educated, they can have a job, they're not sick all the time, their children can, you know, can grow up and have a fruitful life. And believe it or not, that is not the story for everyone in the world. People may not be aware of some of these numbers, but these are real numbers. And you know, currently, the estimates are that there are about 8.5 or 8.6 billion people in the world. 2.6 billion people of those people do not have access to safe drinking water, right? And that's what you say, you know, an improved source of water. That's a very crude and elementary source of water. It's certainly not piped water. It's water where you go and collect it. And at least 1 billion of those people don't have any likelihood of connection to water, right? So they're scavenging around, walking 3 to 5 kilometres a day with jerry cans, trying to find a source of usually contaminated water to drink, all right? And that's, I think, is a mind-boggling figure. And if you look at that, 2.2 billion of those people are using water that's contaminated by feces, right? Or animal or human feces. So you can understand why they're going to get sick all the time. These are real numbers. They're not made up. They are actual numbers. And not surprisingly, a lot of those numbers are in Asia, the Indian subcontinent, Africa, and Latin America. And what I say to people is I'm an engineer and basically we're trained to sort of solve problems and break them down and you know, come up with a solution and to be quite rational about the problem. And I quite often hear people talk about, oh, you know, let's give everyone a house, a computer, a phone, or a car, or whatever. Just to give people safe drinking water is a really simple aspiration. But if you look at the numbers, if you decided, look, all those people should have access to safe drinking water, it means that for every day between now and 2035, we would have to connect 250,000 people to safe drinking water. So if we took all those people in all the countries, put them all together in a very easy place to get to, we would have to build a water treatment plant of the capacity to treat 250,000 people every day for the next 10 years, every day. All right. So I've been in the water industry. I've built a lot of water plants in my professional career. And I don't think many of you will be surprised to know that it's a 3 or 4 year time frame to plan, build and construct a water treatment plant of that size, let alone the cost. So the goals and ambitions of people to provide safe drinking water based on a centralized approach is just not feasible. It's not going to happen. It's just not rational that we can talk about it unless we think about doing it differently. And of course, while we're talking about it, lots of people are dying every day because they catch the diseases or they get contaminated by the viruses and pathogens and bacteria. So my central theme is that centralized water treatment solutions are too expensive. They're not going to work, and they haven't worked to date. And a lot of the countries and people and populations just can't afford them anyway. So what are we going to do? Are we going to give everybody a filter, a little tiny filter in their house, or are we going to come up with something that's realistic? So the problem is simple, as far as I'm concerned. This is my central thesis, is that things as they are don't work. We cannot resolve this problem as an ongoing human development ambition, or even trying to fix the problems we've got now with disasters and emergencies, right? And if you add climate change onto that, it really does become more complex. What I see in a lot of the countries I go now, the traditional sources of drinking water, the surface water that people go to, are just drying up. They're having to look for alternatives. It's not raining as much. The swamps and the dams are not full. The bore water and the groundwater is getting deeper and deeper because more and more water is being extracted. So it's a big problem. So I say sometimes if you keep looking at the same problem, you come up with the same answer. But sometimes if you look at it differently, you'll be surprised at what you see. And what I've tried to do in the last 10 to 15 years is say to people, if we look at the way nature solves these problems, you'll be surprised what you can do. And if you've got a new perspective and you're prepared to say, look, let's do things differently and let's try things in a different way, if you're prepared to look around the side, you can sometimes be surprised at what you see. And my message is that innovative technologies can actually solve some of these problems. And what I want to talk to you today is about what we're doing at SkyJuice, which is quite unique. No one else is doing it. How we're trying to bring the world along to say that, yes, there is a solution. If we adopt technology, we involve people, we get in a collaborative approach, we can actually solve some of these problems. So our mission, or my mission, since I've started SkyJuice Foundation about 20 years ago, is to really ensure that every child in the world has access to safe drinking water. So that means every child in every school can have safe water to drink. They can stay at school. They're not getting sick. Their parents are not getting sick, having to stay home and look after them. And more generally, the communities they come from have access to that water. And it may well be that the safe water solution at the school becomes the safe water drinking solution in the community, which can be shared. And that all folds into what a lot of people are probably aware of, which are the Sustainable Development Goals, which the United Nations have developed and championed over the last 10 or 15 years. And there are about 17 goals, and the one I'm talking about is Sustainable Development Goal number 6, which is providing safe drinking water and sanitation to people. And it is pretty fundamental. If we, as a society and global society, if we can't provide safe water and sanitation, let alone all the other things that they need, how can we build an equitable global society? So a lot of these goals are mutually dependent, but what I say is that safe drinking water is fundamental to be able to achieve anything. So what is SkyJuice? What are we about? Just to give you a snapshot, SkyJuice has been operating about 20 years. It's an incorporated charitable organisation. It's registered with ACNC. We're a tier 1 charity. Over the last 20 years, we've installed about 10,500 water plants. I manufacture and supply the Sky Hydrant water filter myself. I've got a little factory where I make them. No one gets paid. We're all volunteers. I pay my employees in the manufacturing process in the factory to make the filters, and I'll show you what they look like in a sec. We have about 45 global partners. They include Red Cross, Oxfam, World Vision, Médecins Sans Frontières, Rotary, all the major global players, United Nations, UNICEF, and they all now are gradually coming on board and using the Sky Hydrant filter, which is what I call it. I brand it and call it a Sky Hydrant, to use within schools, communities, hospitals and clinics to provide safe drinking water. And I use the example of some of our partners, and one of our major partners is Rotary. And we're very, very proud that we do a lot of projects with Rotary clubs and Rotary International. Rotary is an excellent partner because a lot of the people who belong to Rotary, they're not paid. They don't, they want great outcomes. A lot of NGOs have salaries and income, so a lot of their available income goes to paying people and covering overheads. But Rotary, is very grounded, and it's throughout the world. So when we do projects in various countries, various Rotary clubs can actually monitor, install, and participate in lots of projects. And again, there are a lot of partners we work with, but the important thing for us is that we have a technology that we want to work with people to use to install in lots of different scenarios. And essentially, we're just one cog in the wheel. We have a solution, but we need people to actually implement it and make it happen. So we're a small NGO, obviously Australian-based, but clearly all the work that we do in SkyJuice is globally focused. So that means you need international partners that can actually achieve some of these things. So our mission is very simple. We believe every child deserves safe water, and it's time, to stop talking and start doing something about it. So I spent a lot of time advocating and attending international forums, and what I hear more and more often is all the things that people are going to do that are 5 or 10 years down the track. What we believe in SkyJuice is we actually have to put the rubber on the road and do something now. We need real solutions. We need things that are pragmatic. We need things that people can embrace and employ and deploy now, and not talk about things that are going to take years and years. So the old paradigm about, having centralized charity raising, distributing money is great. There's nothing wrong with it, but we're not going to get to the goal. So we have to do that in a safe, affordable way where people can actually measure their outcomes. And my pitch today is that if we look at a decentralized approach, but very much to what we think about with decentralized mobile communications with our mobile phones, where we have lots of little clusters of mobile towers around, it's changed the way we communicate. And the mobile phone technology and the way that distributed communications has worked is very similar to what I'm talking about with water. What I invented about 20 years ago was a very simple membrane filter. And membranes are used everywhere in nature, right? They're in our bodies, they're in plants, they're in animals. And as I think probably a lot of you know, if you want a solution, just look at the way nature does things. It's not simple usually to mimic it. But what I've done is to use a very simple hollow fiber membrane, very much like a drinking straw, and it's put together into a large amount of surface area into what I call a filter housing. I call it a sky hydrant. I've manufactured it and designed it myself. I've patented it. I've branded it. So the way we approach it, SkyJuice, is when charities and big organisations look at us, they don't look at us as a small cottage industry. They look at us as a bona fide equipment supplier, someone who's an equal peer. So they're not looking down at us, they're looking across at us. And what we say is if we manufacture something that looks like it does the job and it's something they see value in, they will purchase it. So our business model is very different to a lot of charities. We actually manufacture at cost price at a break-even model every year. No one gets paid, but we sell it to our partners. So we sell the Sky Hydrant filter for around about $3,000. And it produces around about 20,000 litres of water every day, 10 to 20,000 litres of safe drinking water. Right? So without getting too technical, what it means is if you pour water into this filter from a height of maybe 1 to 2 metres, it physically removes all bacteria, viruses, pathogens, dirt and material from the water, except salts. Right? Salts are a different thing. So it's quite a radical approach. No one has ever done that before. Usually in the water industry, you use many, many processes to treat water, usually chemicals and all sorts of toxins. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's a very complicated process. It's a multi-stage process. Using membranes, you do it in one step instantaneously without chemicals, and what you've got is safe, clean water. And to show you what that looks like, a simple filter, which I call the Sky Hydrant, typically would be configured with some tanks. So you pump water up maybe to a holding tank, which is elevated. The water runs through that tank into what I call a clean water holding tank. And children in schools can come and collect the water, or it could well be that it could be a community. It could be any type of situation. It could be a refugee camp, a disaster scenario, where people come and collect the water and distribute it within their communities. And believe it, in most of the world, people don't have piped water. They come with containers every day and collect their water. So it's not an unusual proposition. But of course, the total scenario is not just about treating the water, so making sure that people understand the hygiene implications of washing your hands, having clean containers to collect the water in. So a lot of what we do when we work with our partners is to explain the whole cycle, that collecting the water and treating the water is one thing, but you have to have very good personal hygiene practices to prevent disease and make sure that you get those long-term benefits. So what I've done on my journey is to say to people, look, sure, we've got a filter, it can solve the job. Do you want to use the filter? And they quite often come back to me and say, look, Rhett, that's great, but what our community needs is a water plant. And I said, I'm not in the water plant business. I'm basically a charity that makes filters. So about 10 years ago, I designed a microfinance water treatment design, and I've installed a lot of those in Africa, where I supply the whole kit thing as a kit, as a plant that people actually run and the community run and operate as a small water treatment plant for that community. And we installed 22 of those in Africa about 10 years ago, and they've won the Global Sustainability Prize for the best water innovation globally to provide safe drinking water to people. The whole thrust of it is having a small membrane filtration unit within that. I suppose you call it a water kiosk that can actually remove and treat the water at no cost. So it has no running cost. As long as you've got gravity and you can feed water through, the membrane will last 10 years. There is no operating cost. People can produce and sell that water within the community, raise income, generate money, distribute it in the community, and it's a going enterprise. So it's a very different approach to where they rely on the government to provide them a water treatment plant. So what we showed in Kenya and Uganda is if you just have 10, 15 or 20 of these distributed plants, you can service a population of 100,000 people. So why can't we roll out this concept on a wider scale? So my view is that distributed small water kiosks have a very big potential role. So in Africa, we call them the Maji Safi kiosk. And no surprise, Maji Safi in local Swahili means safe water. So we branded the kiosks the safe water kiosks, and we branded the containers Maji Safi safe water. And people come and they buy the water and they sell it within the community. And people are very, very happy. They pay something like about 20 cents for a container of water. And believe it or not, 20 cents is quite affordable for them. And it's actually cheaper than it's more expensive than what you pay for your water in Melbourne. Right? So we pay about $2.50 or $3 a kilolitre for water. All right. And Sydney, it's about the same price. But if you multiplied 20-litre container by 50, and you're paying 20 or 30 cents, you're paying a lot more than what we're paying. But people are quite happy to pay for it. So what we say is that there is no reason why, with the technology and innovation and a little bit of enterprise, we can't roll this out on a global scale. And what SkyJuice has tried to do is show by example how you do that and how we can bring safe water to people throughout the world. And the numbers are pretty compelling. If you look at what it costs to build and supply a kiosk, it's about $20,000, right? And it has a life, the membrane filtration unit has a life of about 10 years. So if you're serving 1,000 to 2,000 people every day with safe drinking water, that works out around about $1 per person per year, right? So it's very, very affordable. And these are people that are earning less than $1,000 US dollars a year. So the excuse that people give me that it's not affordable and we can't do it is rubbish, right? And if you look at the alternative solutions that people look at now, they're usually talking at $20 or $30 per person per year to provide them safe water. So what we want to do now is actually provide a number of showcase projects throughout the world where people can actually look and examine and see how this is done, and try and encourage other people to adopt the technology in all different ways. There's lots of people who have different ways of using it. Some people put it in canoes, take it up the river. In Burma, they actually take it from camp to camp every week, depending on whether the army's chasing them through the jungles. It's really a mobile device that can sometimes be on a truck, or it could be on a motorcycle. It could be in a school. It could be anywhere. But what we want to do is choose locations that are quite different and varied, where people can come along and look at it. So what we've decided to do with the prize money we received from the Zayed Sustainability Prize is to set up 3 showcase projects in 3 different countries. And believe it or not, we've chosen some that are a little bit off the beaten track. Bhutan, which maybe some people have heard of, the Philippines, and Colombia. And each of those has a different slant as to why you would do it. Bhutan is a country that up until a couple of years ago was only opened up to the world. None of the 446 schools in Bhutan have access to safe drinking water. So around about 4 years ago, we teamed up with Rotary and the government of Bhutan, and to date we've provided over 400 water plants and done 85% of the schools in Bhutan. And all those kids now have safe drinking water. So I say to people, it's rubbish that you can't actually attack country by country if you've got the right partners and the right approach. In the Philippines, we've done 246 schools in Mindanao, which is one of the islands in the south of the Philippines. Again, getting the right partner. A lot of these people would never have water, safe drinking water. The government's never going to supply a solution. They're left to their own. But our target and our focus was to provide it in schools. So the community can come to the schools and provide safe drinking water and collect water on a daily basis. So our plan is to roll out a whole lot, another 200 to 300 plants in the Philippines, and show people that in Southeast Asia, there is a community model providing safe drinking water in schools. In Colombia, it's a little bit different. Many of you might know that a lot of people in South America now, and there's refugees all around the world, traveling in all different places, sometimes due to conflict or war, sometimes it's climate, sometimes it's economic reasons, but it's certainly in Latin America. Up until recently, a lot of those have been traveling, from Peru, Argentina, certainly all the southern areas in Latin America, up through Colombia, through the Darien Gap, trying to get in, through Mexico, trying to get into North America. And there's a lot of people in Venezuela and Colombia now that are stranded because they can't get into the United States, and there's probably 200,000 or 300,000 people stuck in Colombia. These people that not what we would normally think of as traditional people living in the communities, they're actually stranded refugees. So what our objective there is to provide small, safe drinking water solutions through the Red Cross and the International Office of Migration to the couple of 100,000 people that just don't have any. They live in shanties, they live in the jungle. So these are the people that we still include in these numbers, but we don't think of them as traditionally, sedentary people living in the sort of villages and clusters that we normally think of. And what we want to do is showcase that everybody, regardless of their circumstances, economic, or political, or geographic plight, can actually have safe access to drinking water. This is a matrix of what we supply. I won't go into it, but what I've done in the last 10 years is to develop a portfolio of solutions rather than my sky hydrant, where we can actually put them in a bucket, we can put them in a tent, we can supply them in lots of different solutions. But what we're saying to our partners is what we've got is a solution based on membrane technology, and you can use it in different ways. But our objective is always the same. We want people to focus on how we can provide safe drinking water on a global scale to try and eliminate global poverty. Access to safe drinking water is essential if you want to eliminate poverty. And quite often what we see is people talk about water that meets WHO standards, which is great. WHO is very important. The standard talks about all sorts of things, obviously bacteria, fecal contamination, lots of things, but it also talks about colour. It talks about a lot of aesthetic issues. And quite often the aesthetic issues are not that important. It's really the things that make you sick or it doesn't taste good. That's the things you really need to address. So what we've tried to do is say, look, if we approach it and say, look, we want to provide safe drinking water to meet the Sustainable Development Goal 6, we can do this by harvesting all the surface water that there is around the world. There's plenty of degraded surface water that's certainly not fit for drinking, very hard to treat, but using membrane technology, which is passive, very simple, you can actually harness a lot of this water, which is technically not even looked at as a possibility, and it can be used for safe drinking. So my question, the wider question I keep posing to people, particularly a lot of the big international NGOs, is, if we start somewhere, we take the first steps, we can actually, we can start the momentum. We can start school by school, country by country, but we have to have a plan. And people say, oh, yeah, it's a very big plan. How can you actually, service all the people in all the different countries with all the political turmoil, all the different considerations? But it's been done before. People said eradicating polio was impossible. It was just too complex. It was too difficult. It was too diverse. But in fact, we've now got to the stage where Rotary, the Gates Foundation and the UN in the last couple of years has essentially eliminated polio globally. There's only a very small number of a couple of hundred cases. And part of that was largely due to Rotary and the power of Rotary to get behind it. And some of these big problems are enormous. But if we sit down and we construct a solution and we attack it and we say, look, we've got a plan, all we can do is fail. But if we don't try, we're not going to get there. So I say providing safe drinking water, using technology, being pragmatic, allowing people to have ownership of the solution instead of relying on donations and charitable endeavours and government. There's no reason why we can't progress the debate and the solution to providing safe drinking water. So like any good business model, you just go for the low-hanging fruit. You go for the things that are easy to achieve. And I say, if you can put these solutions in schools, where they're trusted, they're guarded, people always respect the school, they're going to be looked after, they have a janitor, the target audience is already there, it's children you're trying to assist. Why wouldn't you start a global program providing safe drinking water in schools around the world? We've shown that in SkyJuice, we've done it. We've done it in India. We've done it in lots of countries in Colombia. We've done over 800 installations in Colombia, which people say, wow, Colombia, that's a really strange place to start. You'd think there were more urgent places in Southeast Asia. But if you have the right partners, there's an overwhelming need. So my message is very much, if we approach this in a systematic way, country by country, and we have a standardized solution where we don't try and reinvent the wheel, well, not everybody is out there providing lots of different solutions, but we try and do this in a unified way, then I think there's some great outcomes that can be achieved. And of course, the multiplier effect and the downside is that if people have got access to safe drinking water, children can go to school more regularly, their parents are not spending all their time looking after sick children, they're not providing medicines and medical facilities to keep them well and medicines. It has a deep impact throughout some of these societies. So my question and my challenge always is, how do we do it? Who's going to do it if we don't do it? All right. And I know in Australia, we like to take lots of challenges on. And I say, I've listened to all the stories from the UN. I've listened to all the well-meaning international NGOs, and people keep talking about it. But I think that if we muster the enthusiasm and we attack, a couple of countries and do it, then we've got a really viable showcase to show that, hey, the more people listen and look, the more we can achieve. So my message is pretty simple. If we're not going to do it, if someone doesn't step up, then who is going to do it? So my role in SkyJuice, and I continue to do it, is to roll out as many safe drinking water installations throughout the world, working with partners to show that at least some of these goals that we talk about can be achieved. Some people say I'm crazy, which I probably am, but it certainly keeps me busy, and I'm very excited about it. And of course, you can't do these things without the assistance and the help of many other people who join in the foundation, and they help us do these things. A lot of traveling, a lot of time, but of course, the interesting people you meet along the way in the journey always makes it very pleasurable. And what we hope to do in SkyJuice is to continue it. And I just want to thank you for hearing my story. I'm sure there are a lot of questions about what I've skipped over tonight. I've tried not to make it technical, but what I've tried to tell you is that when I started off 20 years ago, I didn't know where I was going to be today, but I found out the problem's even bigger than when I started, and I'm going to definitely keep going. So more than welcome anyone who has any questions or would like to ask anything that's been missed out in my quick overview on what we do at SkyJuice.
Wow, what a story. I'm sure there'll be questions and discussion, and while people start thinking about that, I wondered, Rhett, what I've been hearing is essentially the story of a long-term solution. But do you also address the issues of disaster scenarios and so on, where you might be able to move something in very quickly to overcome short-term problems?
Yeah, Jeffrey, it's a sad thing, really. What we see in SkyJuice, believe it or not, about 50% of what we do is disaster and emergency related. We don't see ourselves as a disaster organisation, but what we see is that people dramatically impacted by cyclones, floods, hurricanes, and more recently, as we know, some of the very sad events we're seeing in the Middle East, where people just don't have any access to water, and some of it's man-made. We work with a lot of organisations to provide our units in a kit form, and some of those are very well known. Médecins Sans Frontières. There's a very well-renowned agency in Australia called Disaster Aid Australia, which is a Rotary organisation, where we provide it on short response. We put them on a plane, air freight them within a day or two. They're usually used particularly in the South Pacific, where there's been like a hurricane or a cyclone, and it's providing safe drinking water instantaneously to people, where they're not relying on a Hercules aircraft or something to deliver plastic, bucket loads of plastic bottled water. And the sad thing we see, of course, is as you might expect, a lot of these people that are impacted are in impoverished countries, or they're in countries where they really don't even have water to start with. They don't have an established water supply. And what is a short-term solution for many of them ends up being a long-term water supply, because they really don't have access to water anyway. And we're seeing, a lot of what we're doing at the moment is supplying many units into climate-related applications and conflict applications. Yeah.
How long does it take to actually put in installation? You talked about being able to ship it within 24 hours, but putting it all together, what's the time before they're actually able to put a bucket
this is
under
the
a
thing,
tap?
isn't it? Yeah, because people want the solution quickly. And if you think of, I'll just give people a quick example. Imagine you're in Fiji or in Suva or on Andy. Everyone's probably been to Fiji for a holiday, or the South Pacific, and the whole place is hit by a cyclone. It's flooded. There's a metre of water everywhere. Are you going to go to a hardware shop and pick up a couple of tanks and a couple of pumps and deliver them in a truck? So, I mean, the logistics of actually supplying water is impossible. But with sky hydrants, you can actually just carry them, set them up within 20 minutes or half an hour, and you can actually just push water through them and produce water. You need no electricity. You need no pumps. You need no chemicals. So what I've done more recently is develop very small portable systems which people can put in backpacks, and they can distribute it to communities where 15 to 20 people can have safe drinking water in something that's the size of a flask. So it's a very small unit using membranes. So you can get them out there very quickly. You can deploy them using a bucket or something that's very rudimentary that's available, and get as many people as possible with safe drinking water. Because traditionally, you need a big water plant you need to set up, or you need to go and buy all the fittings and put it together. It takes 2 or 3 days, if everything goes well. So it's an instantaneous solution.
Margaret, I see you first.
I'd like to just talk with Rhett a little bit. I've seen 2 situations in Papua New Guinea and Indonesia where I could see that being just magnificent. The first one was the Arop Sisino area on the north coast of Papua New Guinea, where there was a tsunami, you might remember, about 20 years ago, and in one night 20,000 people died. Now what happened was the people then had to be moved off the peninsula and back into the swamps. And when I was there, I could see snakes, tadpoles, frogs, all sorts of things in the water there. And we know there's a lot more in that lagoon there that it probably is not suitable for drinking water. That's certainly one place. And then almost a Cessna plane ride across the border into Indonesia at a place called Jayapura, which is the capital of West Papua. There's a place there called Lake Sentani, where there's shacks on the side of very steep islands, and that water has I watched one family put a tin out the window to get water for cooking, and the kids and the pigs were playing underneath. And the water was shallow and a very strange colour, and
Yeah.
I thought it's another place where, so they're right on our doorstep almost, these crying needs for exactly what you got. The second thing I'd like to talk with you is that I do work in Papua New Guinea, setting up what we call cookhouses and water tanks, which is working in the highlands where they had a very severe drought in 2015-16, and so severe that all their above ground crops died, and the World Health had to come in with rice and bottled water. And we're doing, as you say, a little bit. We've done 4 projects up there where we've put in water tanks to a cookhouse for the women, because I suppose our focus is more not on the children but on the pregnant women. And I just wondered if you have also something for where the water dries up and we can do something about this beautiful rainwater harvesting. Yeah, that's 2 areas. Thank you, Rhett. Yeah.
Yeah, look, rainwater harvesting is great, of course, and that's obviously the first thing you always want to try. And I think you probably know many of these villages that you visit, as bizarre as it sounds, like they can't even harvest the water off the roof. They don't have gutters, and it's very hard to collect the water.
Right.
If you can do it, and that's fantastic. In many cases, it rains quite often, and you can do it. But a lot of those countries also have dry seasons, and as you know, it's 6 or 12 months without water. So, sourcing the water is also an issue, particularly in countries we think of sometimes are quite wet. And how you actually manage the water cycle throughout the year is as important as how you treat the water. So I say to people, understand what the context of what you're trying to do. And I think what you're saying is important as well, because we've had some, and we supply units in all those areas, particularly East Timor and Papua New Guinea. And you could have hundreds of more if you've got the right partners who want to do it. But I always say to them, look, it's great to fill the water, but exactly as you said, have you tried harvesting the rainwater to start with? Have you tried all the obvious things? And quite often you'll find people just clutch for the quickest solution or something that's been offered to them. In India, it rains for 4 or 6 months a year. And I say, why don't you, quite a lot of them will build a large pit and store the water in a large pit. It's putrefied, it's horrible looking water. You wouldn't normally want to drink it, but if you can store it reasonably and you can treat it with a sky hydrant afterwards, it's almost like your water storage reservoir. You need to apply a bit of lateral thinking. And normally they wouldn't think like that, because they look at the water and go, this water is terrible, we can't drink it. So there's all different ways if people sit back and look at the whole solution. And quite often we sit back, like people like Engineers Without Borders, various other people say, look, Rhett, this is what we want to do. How could we use your equipment? We're always welcome to have a conversation with people as to how we can make it work.
Rhett, thank you very much. A most rewarding world that you live in. Well done. One of the partners that I didn't see mentioned anywhere was any of the governments of Australia. What is their attitude to what you're doing?
More recently, it's been encouraging that Department of Foreign Affairs through AusAid in the last couple of years has started to embrace the technology, which is great. They have more recently purchased many thousands of our little small filters. We call them squirts. I give them a name, I brand them, so our clients feel comfortable. They think they're buying or purchasing something that's legitimate. If they think they're buying from a charity, they think it's made by people part-time or something. And they have used a lot of these in the South Pacific. But I must admit, it's a really hard slog when you try and convince people like the UN, some of the big philanthropics. They're very set in their ways. I think anyone who works in government-related work understands how hard it is to change very bureaucratic organisations. We've been lucky in Vietnam a couple of years ago. DFAT sponsored a couple of projects in Vietnam, which was great, it was a showcase. And to their credit, I think they've done the best they can do. It took a long time, but I certainly don't have the view that the world owes me the opportunity to give me a leg up. You've got to prove that you've got something, you've got to showcase it. You can't, feel like the impoverished inventor that people don't listen to what you got. You've got to really bring people on the journey. So I think, to be fair, they've done a good job. Where I get disappointed sometimes is the international community. Some of the very large, wealthy philanthropics in America that, seriously could do a lot more if they were fair income instead of just worried about their tax deduction status. Because a lot of them, you can't do stuff unless you get tax deduction accreditation in the United States, for example. I think some of the big billionaires we're talking about that have philanthropic organisations. On the other hand, the Europeans are very good. The German government is very good, believe it or not, and the French. The Europeans have a very generous attitude to philanthropy, and they do a lot of work. So I think it's Australia's okay, but we're only small fry, aren't we, when you think of the amount of money that's going around globally. Yeah.
Good, thank you.
Yeah, what was your motivation to get your engineering background definitely helped you? But
gosh, it was pretty simple, really. I was a professional engineer, spent most of my life building water treatment plants all around the world, and taking a technology was developed in Australia. It was very unique. It's probably one of the untold stories of Australia. Memtech was the name of the company. They started the whole move towards membrane technology throughout the world. Everyone in the world now uses technology that was developed by Australians in Australia and still manufactured in Australia. And my role really was global, rollout of that technology. And I used to spend a lot of time in countries at nighttime jogging around the countryside after I'd done my work. And I used to see a lot of the village kids and people that desperately needed this technology, but they were never going to be able to afford it because the plants that we made and sold were all driven by computers, microprocessors, valves. They're very sophisticated. And I thought to myself, I have to redesign this so that it works very simply, and we have to make it available, to people who really need it. So one day I decided to resign, and I decided that was it. I'm going to go and do it. So I thought it'd be pretty simple. The technology was relatively easy, but the process of trying to work within the humanitarian world and the NGO world is even more challenging than the private sector. But I wouldn't regret it. It's been a fantastic journey, but no one gives you a free lunch or a free kick. You've got to actually bring a lot of people along on the journey, that's for sure.
Brett, you didn't mention the platypus project or component. Is that's separate from the filtration system?
Yeah. So what I've done, I try and make it easy for a lot of our partners. Are quite intrigued how we could have such an incredible technology that comes from Australia, right? Because Australia is still seen as the people that produces coal and sheep and higher education, and they don't see us as a technology provider. But certainly with the portfolio of the membrane technology, I've tried to break it up into a small, think about it as just a personal unit, a mid-sized family unit, and a larger unit. So I thought, well, if I brand them and give them names, and I create their own personality. So what I've done on the small unit, I call it a platypus, right? And the reason I call it a platypus is because it lives in the bottom of a bucket, and that's where platypuses live, in the bottom of the river. And I found that most of the NGOs love it because, one, it's an Australian name, but it actually produces a lot of water, 200 or 300 litres of water a day. And we hand them out like little packs to families all over the place. It's the same process. It's the same membrane. It does exactly the same thing, but it's configured slightly differently. So what I decided was that if I can't get everyone to have a decentralized water plant for 2,000 or 3,000 people, I've got to give one to every home or every refugee camp. And that's where I branded it Platypus. And if everyone goes to our website, which is skyjuice.org.au, you'll see there is a specification sheet. We're not a company that has a charity that has sales targets or sales KPIs. We basically sell to everybody, and the platypus is something, believe it or not, that a lot of the governments are purchasing for emergency and disaster. So you won't be surprised to know a lot of those are going into the Middle East at the moment for people that are refugees. So,
yeah, you're doing a fantastic job. How much do they retail for, the platypus?
$30.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, very
People
good.
say retail. I think that's a fair.
Oh, I mean, that your price.
No, I'm not offended. I think people want to know what does it cost, and retail is a good word. But yeah, we would sell them for 30. We usually sell them in a box of 20 or 30 to our NGO partners.
Yeah.
And we say to them, look, basically we work on a break-even thing. The more you buy, we'd like to say we can give you a discount, but really it's a bit hard. But $20, $30, $28 is about the price point for them. So
yeah.
Rhett, and thanks very much for your address. The thing that I've been reading about is there's a tsunami coming relative to microplastic in our water.
Yep.
So have you interfaced with anything in this area? And is it serious, or is somebody writing up a lot of scare notes on it?
Look, microplastics is a very interesting conversation, and I think should be taken seriously in the broader environment, particularly the ocean. We've all got, believe it or not, we've all got microplastics in us already. So we're a living experiment about what it does, and there's lots of different sizes of microplastics. Some of the very, very, very tiny particles you may have heard of, things called PFAS, and PFAS is a sub conversation of the whole microplastics. Microplastics in most cases are removed in conventional water treatment plants. It depends on the treatment technology. I think we should take them seriously, because we're seeing more plastics in the environment that keep breaking down all the time. They're in our oceans, they're going to be in our water supply. The good news is that membrane technology that we're talking about, like with sky hydrants and it filters it out, so there's no problem. Microplastics are removed. But if you look at it in a broader scale, it's something that's a much wider problem for the whole society about how we approach this thing. And I think it's very complex, because we've actually got to take a lot of those plastics out of the whole stream from start to finish. That means plastic bags, waste plastic. I've just come from a holiday in the Philippines, and you look at the beaches and you see the amount of plastic that's on the beaches, and all that's getting ground up, and we know the fish are eating it, we eat the fish. It goes round and round. So yes, I don't have any answers for you, but it is a serious issue. Yes.
Thank you.
Well, Rhett, thank you very much for that overview of your project, and for the responses to questions that have covered a whole lot more. Inevitably, when we have speakers at these webinars, we go away informed, inspired, and hopefully knowing that there are people who continue to make this world a better place. And that's certainly something that you're doing for us and for the world. So thank you very much.